So here's a look at the stitch we're going to be learning today. Now I made this in the form of an 8x8 square. I know it looks a little more rectangular. I need to do a better job at blocking it, but this is going to be an 8x8 square, and it's going to be square one for a Tunisian crochet sampler, Afghan blanket, throw, whatever you want to call it. It's a project that I'm working on because I want to learn to do a whole bunch of new stitches, and I want to teach you guys a bunch of new stitches. But I don't want to end up with a bunch of scarves. I think I've mentioned this in other videos, but I live in Florida. I have so many scarves. So I wanted to do something different. And at least the blanket, I can take it to the beach, just kind of hang out like at sunset and stuff and just use my blanket. So I decided I would do that instead. But we're going to be learning 30 new stitches over the course of, well, I don't know, the next 30 or so weeks. So I'm going to try to post a video every single week showing you a new stitch. For this blanket, because it's not going to be finished until like the fall or winter of this year, I chose gem tones. So I'll put the photo here up on the screen and show you the colors that I've selected. I was kind of going with like a boho gem tone theme, but feel free to use whatever yarn you want. This is a medium-sized yarn, and I'm using a 6mm hook. So that's going to be the same throughout the entire project. I got 6 different colored yarns because it's going to be 5 different colors for the squares. And then one color, which I think I'm going to make it the navy blue, is going to be used for the borders on the squares. And because I think I'm going to add like a little bit of a border between all of them. And then I'll add the big border all around the blanket. So I think I'm going to make that a navy blue. That might change though, but we'll see. So feel free to select however many color yarns you want. Like I said, it's going to be 30 squares. And, you can mix and match those however you want. There's going to be no repeated stitches. So it's going to be 30 completely different, completely new stitches, so you won't get the honeycomb stitch or any other stitch you've seen on the channel before. So it'll be fun. At least I think it'll be fun. But anyway, so this is stitch number 1, and I'll show you how to do that today. Now this stitch, I made it up myself. I'm so proud of it. I love it. I think it's super, super cute, and I think I'm going to use it for, I don't know, maybe a sweater for the winter or something. It's quite easy to make. You do have to have some experience with Tunisian crochet, but I'll show you how to make the stitch. You'll be able to do it even if you're a beginner, no worries. I don't have a name for this stitch, so if you guys want to help me name it, that would be awesome. So it's just going to be square 1. So I'm going to call it stitch 1 for the time being. If the title is different, that means somebody suggested a name and I thought it was awesome, so I used it. But here's the stitch. Here's a look at the back of the stitch. So it's quite a beautiful stitch. I was very, very proud of it. I worked on it for several hours actually until I came up with something that I really loved. But anyway, so I'll show you how to work the stitch, and then at the end I'll give you the stitch count so you can actually make, or I guess the stitch and the row count so you can make the square. You will need to block this one. I don't know if you're going to need to block every single one of the squares, but this one I did need to block it. But I'll talk to you more about that as we work along. So I'll show you how to block it and we'll go from there. I will make a playlist. So look for that on the channel. It's going to be on the main page. So under the playlist tab, look for the playlist. I think I'm just going to call it like the sampler blanket stitches or something like that, but I'll put all 30 videos in there. And then once I film how to do the edges and the border, I'll post that on there as well. That way it's kind of easy for you guys to find everything, and for me as well, so that we have the reference for all of the different stitches. I'll number the stitches 1 through, 30, and then add the name of the stitch if there is a name. If there isn't, it'll just be a number. But that way it'll be a quick and easy reference in case we use these for other projects as well. So like this one, I want to use it for a sweater, so I'll just refer you back to that tutorial in case anyone needs to see how to do the stitch over again. Anyway, I've already talked quite a bit, so let's move on to the stitch. Okay, so this stitch is worked in even multiples. So any even number will work. If you are making the sample for the sampler blanket, then you're going to need to chain 36, and that'll give you the 8x8 square. All right, so you begin with your slip knot. So you wrap the yarn around your fingers twice, insert your hook into the first loop, and then grab the back loop and just pull through. Tighten the knot by pulling on the individual threads. All right, so now you begin your chain. If you don't know how to chain, you're going to wrap the yarn around your hook through the back like this, pull the front loop through the back loop, or I guess the top loop through the bottom loop really. So pull through, and there's 1. So yarn over, pull through, 2, yarn over, pull 3, 4, and so forth until you end up with a chain of either 36 stitches or whatever other number you wanted for your sample. All right, so once you've got your chain, you're going to begin on the second stitch from your hook, and we're going to begin our cast on. So skip the first one. In the second stitch, you're going to insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. leave the loop on your hook and repeat with all of the stitches of the chain. So go into the next stitch, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert your stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and just continue. You should have the same number of loops on your hook when you finish as the number of chains that you crocheted. So I made a chain of 12. That means I should have 12 loops on my hook once I have finished my cast on. All right, and once you've cast on, your hook will look like this. You're going to complete a regular return pass. For the regular return pass, you're just going to yarn over and pull through this first loop here on your hook. So pull that off of the hook. Now with all of the remaining loops, if I can say this correctly, you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. So you're going to pull through those 2 loops. So yarn over, pull through 1, 2, and then again. So there are my 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 1, 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and just continue until you are left with 1 loop on your hook. Now you're going to, this is going to be, I guess this stitch is made up of a 2-row repeat. So for row number 1, once I finish here, all right, so this is the foundation row, and this is going to give you the vertical stitches. So if you're new to Tunisian crochet, this is a vertical stitch. It's made up of the back leg, back loop, back thread, whatever you want to call it, and then the one in front. For this stitch, we're going to be using the front leg. And the first thing we're going to do is a Tunisian simple stitch. So skip the first vertical stitch in every row because you already have it on your hook. So go into this next one and Tunisian simple stitch. So insert your hook behind the front leg of the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now the next 2 stitches, you are going to Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. But before you do this, you need to yarn over twice. So we yarn over once, we yarn over twice, there we go, so that you have 2 loops on your hook, and then you Tunisian stitch 2 together. So you get the top leg of the first vertical stitch, and then the second one. You're going to yarn over and you're going to pull up a loop. So far we have the first vertical stitch and then the one that we did on the second one, and then you have this yarn over and then these 2 loops. You're going to grab this yarn over right here. So the very first yarn over that you wrapped around your hook, and you're going to pull it over these 2 stitches. And that's it. So you should have 2 loops on your hook for the 2 stitches that you crocheted. Remember that you always have to maintain a stitch count for this stitch. All right, so you're going to repeat this in the next pair of vertical stitches. So again, you yarn over twice, so there's 1, and this is the loop you're going to pull over like we did right here. So there's 1 and 2, and then you're going to insert your hook behind the top leg of the first vertical stitch and the second vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over and you're going to pull up a loop. So there are my loops again. So here they are. You're going to grab this first yarn over and you're going to pull it over these 2 loops. And there you go. So let's do it again. Yarn over twice, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, yarn over, pull up a loop, grab this first loop of the 3, you're going to pull it over the 2. And then we have what? 1 more. So yarn over twice, Tunisian simple stitch, and that's Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop over the last 2. So this is what it looks like so far. So you began the row with a Tunisian simple stitch, and then you did the 2 together with the 2 yarn over. At the end of the row, you're going to be left with 1 vertical stitch and then the final stitch of the row. Tunisian simple stitch in this last vertical stitch, so just insert your hook behind the top leg of the stitch, and then you're going to cast on into that final stitch of the row, and that's going to be this stitch right here. So this is the one, this is a chain from the previous row, it's the one right above that, and what I like to do is just grab the 2 stitches right here on the side, so the 2 threads, yarn over and pull up a loop. So now if you count your loops, you should still have the 12 loops. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right, now you work a regular return pass. And for this, make sure you loosen up the stitch a little bit. So yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and be careful here because these 2 stitches that are tight together, they generally tend to kind of pull onto your hook at the same time. So pay attention to that when you're doing your yarn over or your return pass. So that yarn over, pull through 2, it's really easy to get both of those loops off of the hook. And then what's going to happen is that your return pass is going to start kind of shrinking the fabric. So you'll end up with a wide section, and then the return pass is going to scrunch it together. So we want a nice and even square. All right. Once you've completed your return pass, we're going to move on to row number 2. So this is what row number 1 looks like so far. All right, now for row number 2, we're going to do this same yarn over Tunisian stitch 2 together, but we're going to do it joining the first, here, let me pull this out and I'll show you here. We're going to do this joining the first, or the last, I guess, this is the first. So it's going to be the last loop of the pair and then the first one. So these 2 are going to be joined together. So we begin on this very first Tunisian simple stitch. So you begin with that yarn over 2, and you're going to Tunisian stitch 2 together using this first Tunisian simple stitch and then the first one in the pair of that second group. So that's the second pair right here. Grab the first one, yarn over and pull up a loop. And then you're going to grab that first yarn over and pull it through. So we yarn over 2. We're going to grab this top leg of that second stitch from that first pair, and then the first one right here, and it's just the top leg, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then you're going to grab the first loop of the 3 that we made and pull it over these last 2. So yarn over twice, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. So we have this first stitch and then this second one. Pull up a loop. There you go. So row number 2 is pretty much just this yarn over and then Tunisian stitch 2 together. And in all of your odd numbered rows, you have to do that. You begin with a Tunisian simple stitch and end in a Tunisian simple stitch. Once you get to the end, you're going to look like this. So you're going to have one vertical stitch right here, and then you have the second one, and then your final stitch of the row. So yarn over twice, pull up this first vertical stitch, this second vertical stitch, Tunisian simple stitch them both together. There we go. And then you're just going to cast on into this final stitch of the row. And this is what our row will look like. So you still have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then 12. And then yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's it. So you would repeat row 1 and row 2 until you complete the length that you want for whatever project you're working on. If you are going to be working on, if you're making the sampler square, then you're going to crochet 21 rows. The 21 rows does not include your foundation row. So it's beginning on row 1 through row 21, and then you do a bind off. So let's begin row 3 together, just because this one looks a little bit different than the first row that we did. So you begin with this second vertical stitch right here, and that is just cast on as a Tunisian simple stitch. So you might need to grab it, there we go, because it's kind of small. So Tunisian simple stitch into the first stitch, and then you begin your yarn over 2, and then Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. Don't forget that in this row, you're going to have a Tunisian simple stitch at the end of the row as well. So once you complete all of these stitches, when you get to the end, this last stitch is going to be a Tunisian simple stitch on its own, and then you cast on. So I'll cast on these remaining stitches real quick and just show that to you. All right, so here I'm at the end of the row. I'm at that last vertical stitch. We're going to Tunisian simple stitch like so, and then just cast on into the final stitch of the row. And there you go. So now, once you have completed all of your rows, so I'll grab the sample here. you're going to have to complete a bind off. Now the bind off is going to give it a nice clean edge at the top, so like this, and it'll look somewhat similar to the one at the bottom. The bind off is, if you've been watching this channel, I tend to use this bind off almost in all of my projects, and it's just a simple single crochet bind off. So you're going to use every single one of these vertical stitches. So you're not going to crochet them with the yarn over or anything like that anymore. You're just going to Tunisian simple stitch into each of the vertical stitches. So I'll begin here on the second one. Remember, the first one we skip. So go into the second one, Tunisian simple stitch. Once you have 2 loops like this, you're going to close like you would a single crochet. So you yarn over and pull through both of those loops. And that's it. Repeat this in every vertical stitch of the row. So go into this next one, Tunisian simple stitch. Once you have 2, you close as a single crochet. So this is a single crochet bind off. All right, and once you get to the end, when you get to that final cast on, you're just going to cast on a stitch, and then you're going to single crochet, and you're going to chain 1. That chain is going to make a small knot, and you're going to cut your yarn and pull your hook out, like so, and then you just weave in your ends. So I'll show you what that looks like with the sample. So I'm right here at the end. I didn't chain 1. So let's just chain 1 and make that small knot. I'm just going to remove my hook here. Sorry, I think I hit the tripod just a second ago. So sorry if I shook you a little bit. All right, and then we're just going to pull on our thread and tighten this up. And there you go. So to weave in your ends, you're going to need your yarn or tapestry needle. And I'm just showing you this because I do get a lot of questions about how to weave in ends with Tunisian crochet. So you're going to look at the back of your fabric, and you're going to use the return pass. So here's the return pass. So there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one right here. So we're just going to stitch in a little bit further towards, towards the center of the what is this called? The fabric. So you don't want to work right here along the edge. You want to be a little bit closer to the center. So we're going to give this 1 stitch. I'm going to turn this over this way. We're going to work in a bit of a square shape. So I'm just going to pick one of these stitches, and see, this one has a stitch that goes up. So we're going to stitch till we get to that stitch right here. And if you look, see there's a post? We're going to hide our stitch in that post. And then we're going to stitch in the opposite direction. So we're going to make a bit of a square shape. And then we're going to go down using this post and just go around and around a few times until you hide your tail end. All right, once you've gone around a few times, I'm going to go a little bit longer on this stitch. There we go. Pull that through. And then we're just going to cut this bit off. So I'm going to pull it a little bit. And then pull on our fabric to tuck that in. And there you go. And you would just repeat that also on this end. Now, depending on how you work this stitch, you can have changes in tension. You will probably want to block this. That will make working with the crocheting it onto the blanket a lot easier. So to block this, if you've never blocked anything before, what you're going to do is you're going to wet this piece of fabric. So get it nice and wet. You can wash it with like a soft soap if you want to, but make sure that it's nice and wet. Get as much of the water out as you can. And then what I normally do, actually let me go grab a towel and I'll show you real quick. Alright, so I went and I got a small kitchen towel just so that it fit a little bit better. And I have washed my little square so it's nice and damp. You're going to lay it on this towel and then just shape it the way you want your square to be. So if you need to pull on it a little bit more just to make it the full 8 inches, then go ahead and shape it however you want. Make sure it's nice and straight, just the way you want it to look when it dries. Remember that this is going to retain its shape once we add all the borders and everything and add it to the blanket. it will retain its shape. So whenever you wash it, it's not going to like shrink up to the same size that it was before or anything like that. So we're only doing this to make it easier to attach to the blanket. So once you have it all laid out the way you want, you can then pin it down or, you know, leave it like that. I'm going to leave it like this. It shouldn't be moving anywhere. So I'm just going to go place it on a table or somewhere and let this dry. But if you have a few trouble spots that kind of keep curling up to the same place, or if you want to make this like perfect, so if I want the little corners to be very pointy or whatever, then you can go ahead and just pin it down. To pin it down, for those of you that need to see, you just, there you go, place your pins wherever you want. Make sure it's nice and tight all the way around the sides or wherever you need them. And that's it. That's how you would block a project. So yeah, so this is square number 1 of our sampler square blanket or Afghan or throw, whatever you want to call it. I will be showing you the next square next week. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to see the PDF patterns to any of the projects you've seen here on the YouTube channel, you can swing by the website. That's modebespoke.com. If you'd like to see some of my other projects, just the photos and stuff like that, you can swing by my Instagram page, and that is @modebespoke. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again in the next tutorial.